Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Hey, if you wanted to ask me any questions about Knowledge for Men or any challenges you currently have and want me to help you break through, then check out my live weekly talks at kfmlive.com, where I share my biggest lessons learned about being the most powerful version of yourself and interact with the Knowledge for Men community live. To attend the next live event, go to kfmlive.com. Again, that's kfmlive.com. Hope to see you there and have a conversation with you. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Scott Brennan. He's a president and accelerated team success expert at Bold Break Inc. and the author of the new book, The Surging Team, 10 Bold Skills for Accelerated Team Success. Scott, happy to have you here on the show.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm happy to be here.
All right, Scott, glad you're here. And let's dive in now with a favorite success quote or a saying that you've got, something that you've lived by that's helped you on your journey.
Sure. I'm going to go with a quote from No Easy Day. It's a book. The author is Mark Owen. And the quote is that when you're feeling fearful and you're actually frozen by fear, then the next thing you should do is to just look down and take one handhold forward at a time. Stay in your 3-foot world and just take one handhold forward in that 3-foot world.
Yeah, so Mark Owen, I've read that book, No Easy Day. He's a Navy SEAL, and I believe what he's talking about in that quote is, I think he's talking about his BUDS training. I think that's what he's talking about, is like going through that kind of that hell week and just how do you get through that? Just take one step forward and just live in that 3-foot space.
Yeah, he was actually, he was cliff climbing, so he was taking a little extra course. And he felt like he was looking at a cliff overhang, and he didn't think he could get over it, and he started losing his strength as he's hanging there. He thought he was going to fall, and then his instructor called out to him, "Just look down, Mark, and take one handhold forward, because if you look up, when you're feeling fearful and you look up and you see too many opportunities, too many decisions, that's when you start getting weak." And I'll transition that into the journey of an entrepreneur. Is one of dealing with constant fears. And I'm sure your audience and you yourself have faced a few in your own entrepreneurship journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in life in general. Life is full of fears, regardless if you're an entrepreneur or not. But absolutely, there are many entrepreneurs listening to the show. Let's dive in now. How did you get started with what you do? Take a few steps back and walk us through your story.
Sure. I had the great American opportunity to start my own business. So I was an executive at a GE company, and then there was a buyout. I had stock options. I mean, these are the things that all your younger people are listening here are probably thinking about one day for themselves. So I had that chance, and the options were above water. So I looked around for what to do next. I was also a young man still, and I thought, well, I'd try to start my own business. And I looked around for options, and I landed on a franchise business. And I ran that for 9 years, and then I was able to sell it profitably just last year. And that's when I had a little bit of time, and I wrote a book on the experience. Because if you've ever started a business, then you've faced those fears even multiplied. And it's an experience you don't soon forget. So I thought I'd write down how I was feeling and what I learned. And then The Surging Team, the book that I have out now, is about that journey.
Okay, so the book, The Surging Team, and so we got 10 bold skills for accelerated team success. Now, in this new franchise, when if you could share with us a little bit about what it was, if you can, and then when you first got this, were you struggling? Was there a lot of hardship, a lot of failures? Were you going negative? Were you down under? And then you started to build your team, and this is what led to your success?
Yeah. So if you're looking at starting a business, eventually you'll run across a franchise consultant, or you'll start thinking about a franchise, because most people have never started a business. It's there's few Americans that have done it. And so franchising starts to look really good. So you maybe start talking to some franchisors, and they kind of play off the unfamiliarity that we have with starting a business, and they present you with a plan that's already preconceived, so you're following a plan. Here's what you're never prepared for is when you start running out of cash, you start running out of your capital that you put aside, the fears come on strong, because then you're facing increasing debts, you're possibly facing bankruptcy, and your wives and husbands don't like to see your business bringing your whole family underwater. And I faced that point. I learned that's when you really become an entrepreneur, is when you face that point and you decide to go on and commit yourself and your resources that you have left and make it work. And that's what I was able to do. And my business was a computer consulting business. And what we did to turn it around was it was a series of marketing efforts. So it's really never, success in a franchise business is really never about the exact technical business you're in. It's really about marketing yourself effectively. When you get a chance to talk to someone, to be effective when you're communicating one-on-one with a potential client.
Okay, so you mentioned something there that really stood out to me, which was you're possibly going bankrupt and your business you're getting into debt, and no one wants to bring their family down with them too. And that for me really stood out. How did you communicate with your family? What were the things that you did to climb out of a position where bankruptcy is possible? The business, all the money, the family's money is going into this business, and it's drowning. It needs help. It's not succeeding.
I'll tell you that when you're an entrepreneur, you've got a business. The thing you need to be looking out for is, if you've ever read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
He's got a great outlook on how to look at opportunities. And Martin Seligman, another one, great at how to keep an optimistic outlook, because you need to always be looking out for what is the opportunity, because they're surrounding us. They look like problems all the time, but the opportunities are problems. I'm downstairs in my home, and I'm putting together a marketing campaign. It's way after midnight. I got to work the next day, of course. And my wife comes downstairs and asks me what I'm doing. Now, our marriage was strained at that point, mainly because I'm worried. When men get worried, we get a little bit quiet, maybe, or we get a little bit loud. When men worry, we don't usually cry or vent, all our emotions. We usually one or the other. We get loud or we get quiet. So I was quiet and just quietly working as hard as I could. And she asked me if she could help me. And all of a sudden, I knew this was a decision point for us. And I just stopped, looked at her, and I could have easily said, no, I'll handle it, which is what I would normally do.
Right.
But in this case, I realized that this was my chance to bring her into my world and start sharing. And she actually helped me put together a great marketing campaign that pulled us out. And we ended up winning Franchise of the Year a couple years later, and then $1 million sales in the franchise system a few years after that. So it was a decision point, and I look back on it, and it's one that when I do think about it, even now, you get choked up sometimes.
Yeah. Yes, I could see that being a really emotional moment for the two of you. And did you feel like it was like her support when she said that? It was like, hey, I support what you're doing here, and I want to do it with you. Was there some type of feeling where you're or that boosted you, where it was like, wow, I have the support of this woman I love, and from here moving forward, we're doing this as a team, as a family?
Absolutely. There's a concept, a team success concept that I write about in the Surging Team that is about increasing the well-being of your team, and that goes so well for all your teams. So you have a family, and they're your team, and if the team feels like when they're together that they're increasing their well-being just by being together, so they're not draining each other of energy. There's not constant arguments, but when you're together, you feel better that you've been together. If you can have that feeling, and as the leader of your teams, if you can set the conditions so that when you are together with your work team or with your home team, that people are feeling better that they've been together, that's when the good things start to happen in your life. And really, the definition of success, the balanced life, is involved in, do you feel like you improved your happiness and well-being when you were together?
Yeah. And do you recommend families or couples working together, or do you not recommend like keeping it separate, your work?
It's almost impossible to separate.
Okay.
And I mean, today's workplace is all encompassing, and we rarely do you get a chance to separate work and home life anymore. Being so easily contacted with cell phones and video conferencing and texting, you can't get away from work anymore. In fact, if you delay 7 minutes, I found like 7 minutes is about the most anybody will go before to leave you alone to respond, before they try the next level of trying to contact you, whether it's a family member or a work member, right? So,
right.
You can't really separate work and personal anymore. So the sooner you can establish a good working relationship with your wife, even if she is or isn't working in the business, she'll hear the stories, she'll know the characters, even if she's not directly working in the business.
Okay. So let's go into your book here, The Surging Team, 10 Bold Skills for Accelerated Team Success. If you could briefly go through, what are these 10 bold skills?
Sure. Let's pick out a few. The first one I mentioned a bit, and the first one, this is a book written for the leader of the surging teams. And the first skill that we talk about is, how does a leader increase his awareness of opportunities? I've been trained as an engineer, so I worked on software teams, and usually in a software environment, the leader was promoted because he was the best engineer on the team, right? So then there's an opening, they choose him, and so there he is. And now, having no management training, the leader, sometimes in these environments, at least the times that I've seen this happen, I've been on those teams, the leader is competing with you. He's still trying to be the best software engineer on the team, but that's no longer their jobs. So the opportunity here for the leader is to find ways to help the ordinary people on their teams, to help them increase their well-being, to help them use their most highly developed character traits to move the team forward, and to move out of the role of being the lead technician.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like an ego play going on there, where it's like the guy started the company, started the business, so he's kind of feeling like the rock star, and then to bring someone on, like he still wants to be. It was like, no, like I'm the one in control kind of thing with the ego, but it's about dropping that ego down.
It happens all the time, right? I mean, it's hard to set aside any technical competence that you work so hard to develop, and then to set that aside and say, look, you're working on a complex project. You've got multiple people that all need to function at their highest levels. And the only way to make that happen is for you to coordinate it. You're the orchestrator now of that. And it's no longer your single skill that's going to move the project forward. That's the environment that we're all working in now, that we're in a service economy, a complex service economy. And we need everyone functioning and their efforts coordinated toward a bold purpose.
Yeah. So talk about that bold purpose. How does that play a role in with the team?
Yeah, I heard another interview you did with a halftime author. That was fascinating.
Yeah. Jeff Spadafora. Yep.
Yeah, he talks about that too. And I didn't hear him say it, but one of the ways that you can determine the purpose on a team is to ask the team, when did they feel like they were working effortlessly? When did they feel like they got in, like if you're on a sports team and all of a sudden everybody's catching the passes and everybody's seems to be playing to their maximum capability, they call that flow. So if you ask your team, when did you feel like you were in the flow? What was the circumstance? Tell me a story about when you worked effortlessly, you're in the flow, and let's hear the best stories we have on our team. And from those stories, that's when your bold purpose will emerge. And what the team should do then, once they find these stories, is keep repeating them. Because we learn through stories and remember stories more than we do book learning. That's just how we're made. That's how to engage the team, ask them for their stories. You involve everyone. Then you choose the best one, and use that for your purpose.
Yeah, I like that. And instead of kind of just creating one and saying like, all right, guys, look, here it is, you go in and first ask and investigate and find out what is working for them, and then putting something together that is already proven to work based on past successes. Kind of like looking to your team for that purpose, which is interesting. That's different.
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't engage your team members and you just instead give them your great wisdom, that then you're missing. You won't engage them. They won't feel like they were part of it. They won't be as invested, and that's a component of a surging team, is that they feel engaged in the same to the same level you are in the success of their effort and their bold purpose.
Yeah. It's something that works for product and service creation too. It's like when I was first starting this company, Knowledge for Men, like I would create products or membership sites or audio programs that I wanted. I was just like, oh, this is what they need. And then, it would be okay. It'd be fine. But when I started looking and investigating and surveying and asking my listeners and readers and people who are involved in this community, what is your biggest challenge? What do you really need help? What is the one thing that you want solved today? And I started just seeing similarities and different things that were different ways that people were struggling. And I started creating products based and services based off that. That was a big turning point in my business.
When you can unleash if you can take the ordinary people on your team and you can get them to feel that their ideas matter, and if you can do that, you will win in the marketplace of ideas, because most teams aren't functioning that way, and most leaders don't understand that that's their job. Their number one job is to set aside the urge to bring these great ideas to the team and say, hey, here's my ideas, let's implement them together. That's not your job anymore, but it's to take the best ideas. And, some people on the team are going to be shy, right? They're not going to be if you just listen to the bold ones all the time and the shy ones never get to talk, you'll lose those people. And that's about half the population. So the leader needs to be really careful at making sure that every member of the team has a chance to contribute the character strengths that they're bringing to the team. And when everyone can do that, then you've got a surging team that usually will win and will beat other teams in the marketplace.
Yeah. What do you find is the biggest motivator for your team? We often think it's going to be, compensation, like what they're paid. If you can talk about that, and also what are some other methods that maybe you have found that were actually more powerful than compensation? Right.
And I've had the good fortune to have some pretty high-paying positions and corporate executive positions. And what I found was that a couple of those positions felt like jail sentences.
Wow.
Because I didn't feel like my ideas were wanted, and it didn't feel like the leaders of the team expressed what purpose we were driving for. And in fact, nobody even asked me what it was. Maybe they assumed that I knew. And instead, we were treating each other like we were all stars. I mean, imagine a football team full of stars. Every player is a star. And are there such teams that win? Usually the team has one or two stars. And then all the other ordinary players have to play way beyond their skills. And that's really those are the teams, when you're on those teams where the ordinary people are playing toward the same bold purpose and playing above their heads in the flow. Those are the teams that you would accept lower compensation to be on a team that had a purpose together, that felt like together that all their talents together were needed, and it was a worthy purpose they were striving for. And then they won. They actually, their product won out in the marketplace. When I was working for GE, we had a frequent dining program, and our competitor in the marketplace had been there for 10 years, about 10 years. And we actually beat them in the marketplace, and the airlines picked up our programs to use it for their frequent flyers. And having that, having the team experience that together, there's not a time that in your life that goes by like this that you won't remember it and celebrate it together. In fact, that team that I was on constantly gets together and constantly recalls the stories. It's a source of happiness for us when we can look back on a time when our ideas mattered, our talents on the team mattered, and we won.
Yeah, there's something really, I think, almost primal about humans wanting to just be a part of something, like be a part of a community of people. And like we were saying, and then we worked together and then we won. I think even for all of us, even listening, like we can all think back to a time, whether it was in school or in sports or in our careers, where we got together and we riled up, and we had this, there was just something about going to work. Like you couldn't wait to get to work. You're just working and everyone's doing their part. And then you guys succeeded and did something beyond the goal itself, and how that felt, and how there was no, it's like no one got like crazy bonuses, or maybe that happened, but it wasn't about a financial type of incentive. It was just this feeling of a team. And I think it's a primal thing. I think we really do want to be a part of a community.
Exactly. And recently, I thought this was fascinating. I was doing a little research on what was it for my book, The Surging Team, on what was the commonality between the different team experiences where I was leading the team, both at GE and then in my own company. What was it was it me? I mean, it seemed like there had to be something I was doing. And when I read some books by Dr. Martin Seligman, who's the father of learned optimism, and something I have that my grandmother and my mother have is optimism. I'm an optimistic person. And that is a common thread that leaders that can motivate a team of people have, is that even if they're not optimistic by nature, they learn how to be optimistic, and then they encourage their teams with the same optimism.
Yeah, I really think it's a big topic. And for what would you say to someone who doesn't feel like they have that in their existing team? Like they want to bring that, like, yeah, I want that. Like, we're all just kind of doing our own things at work, and we don't have that in and maybe they're not in a position of leadership. They don't feel comfortable bringing that up. But what advice would you give to someone to bring that to their team?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's a technique. It's a simple one. It's take your org chart. So when you think of your org chart at work, so here you are, you're leading a team or you own the company, and if you're lucky enough, you have, let's say you have 5 people that work for you or more, and you look at the org chart. Usually the org chart has the name of the person that's working for you, and it has their title, right? And you're looking at that, and you have a big project, and you're trying to find someone to lead the project for you. All you see is the name and the title. That's not enough. What you should add is to add the top 5 character strengths that each of your team members have. So let's say, like for me, I have a lot of perseverance that's one of my top character strengths, is I won't quit. I mean, I'll keep working and trying to find an answer. And I also have hope is another character trait. But other people have traits that I don't have more of, like maybe they have more of a trait of analysis, where they'll go through more iterations of analysis before they make a decision. I tend to be a little quicker to decide, which isn't always good, but I don't get stuck. Well, the way I look at it, I don't get stuck too long at any barriers. But sometimes you need to think it through more deeply. And so when you're looking at a project, what you really are looking for is who has the traits on the team that could make the best decision for this, that would lead this project to success. And if you can do that, what you're doing is you're using not the people and their titles, but you're using the character traits that they're bringing. And then everyone is equal there, because all character traits that we have are useful in certain circumstances. They're all useful. And so that's how a leader can start looking differently at the team and start involving everyone based on their character traits, and not just putting people in a box that contains their title.
Yeah, and I think something like that would take a lot of courage to do, and to be able to accept that risk almost to empower everyone. It's like you're gonna have to be courageous, and if you're listening to someone down here, that's gonna take a risk. But I think that's what it takes to have what you're calling a surging team.
Absolutely, and that doesn't always work out. I mean, not everyone can be successful. I mean, people can get into all kinds of problems in their life, and you can't even just knowing what their top character traits, that doesn't solve. If someone has a substance abuse problem, or if someone is failing in their relationships, at home, and they don't bring well-being to the team at work anymore because they're just failing outside of work. I mean, you want to help people. If you're in a corporate environment, the quicker you recognize people who aren't helping the team move forward, and you can recommend those people to the counseling that maybe if you're in a larger organization, usually they'll have counseling services, but you need to move them into the counseling services as fast as you can, because they'll drag the team down if you don't. And if you're a small company and you've got someone who is just bringing negativity to the team, these are tough times. The longer you think, well, I can rehabilitate this person and he'll come around. If you hang in there too long, you'll alienate the others on the team. So that's a tough decision point when you realize that someone is not able to bring their character strengths to the team because they have too many other negative things going on in their life.
Yeah, that's a big topic there. And how would you, if it's not getting better, if someone is dragging down the team and it is clear that, if you don't make a move here, then your team is going to suffer because of this, because of what's happening here with this individual. How do you go about making that termination or letting that person go?
You always want to do it quick. And as soon as if you're the leader of the team and you start thinking that here's somebody on the team that's failing, as soon as you're thinking it as a leader, it's time. Because now it's in your consciousness, and you'll be thinking about every time you see that person, that's all you're going to be thinking. It's very difficult once you get a mantra in your head about someone, it's very difficult to change your mind about it. And it's better now to just end the relationship. It's difficult. So what I would do is I would try to meet people at a more public place, so there wouldn't be a scene. So I'd try it instead of, if you meet somebody privately, sometimes you don't know if they could say that maybe you were inappropriate, for instance. So I try to meet people at a public place, like at a restaurant or a library, at a Starbucks, and tell them there, so they'd be less likely to make a big scene out of it, and we could part amiably at that point. And in a corporation, you want to do that in the company's conference room usually, so that you're in an environment where you can kind of control what happens there in the corporation.
Yeah, got it. It's always a tough thing that happens, but you got to do it for the sake of the team. So going on here with some of these other bold skills, like what else do we need here to create that surging team, that winning team in the company?
Something that came out of my research for the book that I thought was it was most fascinating to me is the topic of innovation. So I've read the Steve Jobs book. I'm sure you have too.
Yeah, Walter Isaacson.
Yeah, what a fascinating read. And here's a guy who innovated, and he was one of the top innovators in all of history. So if you think back on what our life was like before the iPhone. I mean, it's crazy. You can't even imagine it. So where does innovation come from? And do we have to, are we really waiting for a Thomas Edison, or are we waiting for Steve Jobs, another Steve Jobs? Innovation is how an ordinary product. So if you're competing in the marketplace, like take my IT company. So I have a business-to-business technology company, so we're going in and helping companies with their computer networks. And if you open the phone book, there's probably 10 pages in every city, maybe more, of companies that do just this. But the companies that'll win are the companies that can innovate, even a process, something that doesn't seem important. And here's something our team was able to do is we needed more people, right? So if you have more staff and you're competing against a company that has fewer staff, you have a little bit of advantage now because you have different experience level on the team, one more person. How do you take the same revenues and add to the staff? Well, you can only do that two ways. You're either going to take on debt, and you don't want to do that if you can help it, or you have to reduce costs. So one thing our team innovated, and our franchise system had not seen this, is to move away from an office. So we went from an office environment where we'd have a physical location. We'd go in, so everybody drive in the Chicago area every day. You can imagine the traffic every day. And when people get to the office, what do? They talk, right? How'd the Blackhawks do last night? I mean, there's chit-chat always. And we took that out, the cost of the office, the cost of driving, the time driving, and we all started working from home. So there was no office to drive to. As soon as we started working right away on client issues. It seems like a no-brainer to do this, but the company had not seen this before. And that's something we did to reduce costs in our franchise system. I took those savings and I hired more staff, and that helped us to win.
Wow. That's good there. That's good. That innovation, we were talking about Steve Jobs. Like, I just recently I've seen both of the movies and I've read the book. And I always find it, the big thing that I always am like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? Was when Steve Jobs got fired from his own company in the early 90s, I believe it was, or the late 80s. They had more corporate type CEOs come in, and they stopped innovating. And they were trying to sell the same products, which was the Apple II, for years and years and years, over and over again. And they were driving the company to almost bankruptcy. And when they brought him back, obviously he came out with the Macintosh again and the iPod. And so just the idea of innovation and where does it come from? I think it's that's kind of a big question we all need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah, so think about what we talked about already, that we talked about coming up with a purpose, a shared purpose. I call it a bold purpose for your team, one that you don't bring as the leader, one that the team is bringing and telling stories about. This is who we are. This is when we solve client problems, difficult client problems. So I tell a few stories in my book about times that we solved difficult client problems and what was the environment that we were in at the time. How were we feeling? And so our stories always had emotions, and we'd tell those stories every time we met. And pretty soon when we would meet, we'd look around to see who was going to tell the story this time. And maybe they told a little different every time, and it's okay to have the stories then become legends, your own company legends. And when the team starts to believe their own legends, that's now you're in an environment now, I call it a collective spirit has developed, and that's when innovations are very likely to occur now. So if you have the conditions that you have to have for an innovation to be needed is you need a barrier. So something comes up. For me, one of the barriers I had, I wanted to hit $1 million in sales for the company, and I wasn't able to do it. And I tried 2 or 3 years in a row, and I was just short. And then, so we had the innovation that I mentioned earlier that I brought forward was we reduced costs, and then we brought on more staff. And then that took us over the edge because then we could bring in more clients and service them and take in their revenues. But that's when the team had a shared purpose, telling stories. How do we get to 1 million? We kept talking about it, and we finally hit it. When the team doesn't believe they can do it, they don't share the purpose of the company, they don't believe the stories, you won't have innovations then.
Yeah, I like that. Creating that environment where innovation is possible, and really creating that from within the team.
I had an interesting situation, like with you mentioned with Steve Jobs, how he actually got fired from his company. This in the 10th chapter of my book, I talk about, and it's one of the skills, is always be ready to lay the groundwork for the profitable future sale of your company. So if you're an entrepreneur, I've talked to so many entrepreneurs, that other franchisees when I was a franchiser, and they would tell me, "Oh, I'm going to pass the business on to my son." And I asked, "Well, how old's your son?" "Well, 6." Like, really? So people have this fantasy of what they'll do with their business. And really what you should be looking at is your business is an investment. And when it's time to maximize the value of that investment, you should be ready for it. So what happened to me is I was out with my wife. We were just out on a Sunday at an RV show looking around, and I got a call, and my top engineer was leaving. And this is a big problem in a small company. And not only was he leaving, but he said he was thinking about taking 2 other engineers with him. And so that would pretty much render me unable to help my clients on the next day. So I had just a few seconds here to think, because I was not in work mode. And what I decided to do was to offer him a chance right there to buy my company. So I reasoned with him, why would you want to try to start a competing company when you can just buy one you helped start to begin with? And that really changed his mindset, and it changed the trajectory of my career too. So from that moment on, for about the next year, we were working on transitioning the business to him, and we worked on the pricing of the business and all that. But there's a case where I put myself out of business to maximize the investment I'd already made.
Wow. In that split decision, you basically sold your company, or it was either sell it or you were going to go through some really tough times.
Yeah, and I looked at it, I mean, the first thing you always encounter is fear, right? So we mentioned that with the quote that we led off with. If you're an entrepreneur, you need to make peace with fear, because you'll have fear. And it shows up at times when you're not really asking for it to show up, but it'll show up. And first thing to do is walk yourself back. You know, it's not usually the catastrophe that you think it is. When I stepped back a bit and stopped panicking, I realized it was an opportunity to maximize my investment. If you start a business, think of all the costs. You have the franchise fees, you have the cost of the early mistakes, the cost of all the marketing programs, the cost of bringing on staff and finally getting the right staff. So you have a lot of sunk costs in the business. And the only way you really get those costs out and to come back to you as net profits is when you sell the company. I mean, that's when you really get to have the biggest chance for a little windfall. And that's what happened in this case. It turned out for the good.
Yeah, really good. And I like where this interview is going so far. Let's now take it a few steps deeper and dive into the knowledge round. Just going to ask you some rapid fire questions here. So Scott, are you ready for the knowledge round?
Ready.
All right. If you're tired of living the mundane day-to-day and just the daily grind and want to experience more joy and fulfillment in your life, then check out my live weekly talks and open Q&A with the community, where I share my biggest insights on becoming the most powerful version of yourself to rise above mediocrity and create the life you desire. Register for the next upcoming event at kfmlive.com. Again, that's kfmlive.com. And hurry up before all the spots are taken. Hope to see you there. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. So what advice would you give to someone who's really feeling kind of lost or unsure of what they should be doing? Like how was it that you decided on which, business that you were going to start? And I feel like there's a lot of guys in that kind of sticky position where they want some change, but they're not sure which direction to go in.
Yes. I saw another interview you did with I think Mark Manson on he called it screw finding your passion. I think that was
his take. That was his take on it.
But you know what? What I thought was interesting is if you look for the perfect opportunity, you'll be looking for a really long time, and you may never choose a business, right? You might just choose. Finally, your wife or your husband will say, "Look, just take another job with someone else because you can't make a decision." So really, there's opportunities all around you. Just choose an ordinary business that you feel like you have some competence in or some reasonable amount of interest in. Just to take an ordinary opportunity, and then from there work toward bringing in ordinary people and creating an extraordinary opportunity for yourself. So don't sweat the big decision on looking for the perfect opportunity. Just do the little things right each day, and that's what the 10 bold skills that I have are really condensing an MBA program down there. What are the steps every day you need to take? So my advice, take an ordinary opportunity.
Yeah, I like that. Simplifies it. Now, let's see here. Having written a book, I'm sure you've read a lot of books on this journey, probably, and even too, just building your business and selling it. What would you say are 2 or 3 of your most influential books that have helped you on this journey, and why?
I really love biographies. So I like getting into the heads of people and finding out what were they thinking? How did they decide to do those things? So I mentioned the book on Steve Jobs. That was really eye-opening to me, the one by Walter Isaacson, to find out how was that genius thinking. Another one I liked was I just finished. I mentioned Mark Owen, and I read 2 books of his. After I read No Easy Day, then I went back and he had another book out called No Hero, and just learning the heroes of our country, our special forces, our Marines. My son is a Marine, so I'm very touched by the sacrifices that our warrior class is making. I enjoy those books, and I'll give a more recent one I've read was a story of Lewis and Clark, and who were the first to explore our great American Northwest, St. Louis all the way to the Oregon. Very interesting in the courage that they displayed every day, meeting Indian tribes that had never been, that were unknown, languages unknown. So I enjoy those biographies.
All right, good books, and I'll be checking some of those out, throwing them on the wish list here. Now, this next one's a scenario, and it's this. It's, Scott, imagine you had 60 seconds with your 25-year-old self. So 25-year-old Scott, if you can think about where he's at, what would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
25. Relationships matter. At 25, the world seems so open and fresh. I heard you talk to other guests about this, how you feel when you're 25, that there isn't any limits. And you can kind of cast off. Relationships seem so easily discarded and then easily then another relationship chosen. But those decisions you're making will really set the tone for your life. And so the being loyal, and when you're young, if you can, the sooner you can develop the ability to help other people who meet you increase their well-being. So after they finished meeting you, if they feel like that they've been better off by meeting you, that you've increased their well-being through just a brief encounter, that is a gift that you can keep throughout your life. You'll attract people to you, and they'll trust you sooner if when they meet you, engage with them just briefly and leave them with a little positive part of yourself, and not always take from other people. When young people are so easily able to, it seems these days, can take too much and not give back.
Yeah. Got it. Would you say this is very much, or what would you say is your philosophy on life and success, if that wasn't it?
Philosophy. It's more the quote from Gladwell
Okay.
is to look at life as opportunities. And if you don't feel optimistic, like my grandmother was optimistic and my mom optimistic again, but if you don't feel optimistic, you can learn to be optimistic. And one way to go about that is if you feel like you're a pessimistic person, or if maybe you're married to someone who's pessimistic, there's an easy exercise that's actually kind of fun. And I've given this to people, and they've come back to me and said that this is the most impactful exercise they learned, and it's the three blessings. So before you go to bed, now this is right before you're closing your eyes, you think of three things on that day that were a great blessing to you, that you're glad that it happened, and you just dwell on them for just a few minutes and think of three good things that happened that day. And if you can do that and you do it daily, you're developing your sense of optimism. So you can learn how to be more optimistic.
Yeah. So really count in your blessings, what you're grateful for, because there's so much. There's so much that you could be, but instead of seeing that, sometimes we tend to just see what we don't want to see, the negative, the kind of the bad things happening, focusing on those. It's like where you focus, that's where you go.
Yeah, and they're all around you. I mean, if you look, I swim every day, and I noticed at the pool right next to me, in the lane next to me, there was a woman who was routinely training the Paralympians, and so these are the physically impaired, and just seeing what she was doing made what I was doing seem insignificant. I mean, look what she was building into people that society usually doesn't know what to say, or doesn't even pay much attention to. But here she was every day, building into them. So I made an effort to talk to her, learn her name, and I encourage her every time I see her. But just there's a blessing right there for me that I had a chance to meet someone that was doing something that probably would never be recognized, but I helped her I thought I helped her anyway, feel better about herself for that day.
Yeah, I like that. That's really cool. All right, that's going to conclude the knowledge round there. Thank you so much for that, Scott. Really enlightening. I usually ask what's exciting you today, but what are you excited about for 2016?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do with the Surging Team is, having had a franchise business, I'm trying to bring the Surging Team concepts to franchisers. So I've got a few early discussions now with franchise systems, because what I'd like to have them do is incorporate these concepts into their own training, so that they're good at training on their specific, on whatever their competency is. So whether it's a food preparation, or whether it's a service, or whether it's whatever the franchise concept is, they have a manual on that, but they don't have manuals on how do you develop a sense of well-being? How do you develop the collective spirit? How do you allow your franchisees to innovate? Because franchisers, by definition, don't want you to innovate, but yet they want you to succeed. So they have to have some leeway for innovation. So this is my challenge, and I'm excited about it for early in the year here. I have a few opportunities to bring the concepts of the Surging Team into some franchise systems and help more people own a successful business and have a life where they can thrive.
Yeah, I like that. And I can think of a ton of different franchisees that would definitely need some of that. The team members would be very empowered if they had that, and I think they are lacking that. But this has been good. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do. For all the listeners, you could check out the Surging Team. Just go to Amazon, type in Surging Team, and you'll see it right there. Author Scott D. Brennan, and it pops right up there on Amazon. So check out that book on building a Surging Team. So Scott, thank you so much for what you've given us here in this episode and sharing your story. Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and 1 million downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we've just started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review in iTunes. It really helps to grow the podcast. Guys, 2015 is the official year of living with purpose, where every day you do only the things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. Check out kfmfree.com to get free tools I've created to help you crush life. Again, that's kfmfree.com. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and I'll see you in the next episode.